Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Montague, and in this video we are going to cover Unit 3, Lesson 6 on debugging on code.org. So I'm in here in Unit 3, and we're going to go down to Lesson 6 on debugging. In this video, we are going to cover bubbles 1 through 5 together. There will be a separate video for bubble 6. So let's jump into our debugging today. So the debugging process is the process of finding and fixing problems in your code. So code.org offers a 4-step solution for debugging your programs. So we're going to go through what this process is and how you can apply it to your projects using code.org. All right, so when you are debugging, the first thing you want to do is describe the problem. All right, so what did you expect your program to do? What does your program actually do? And does it happen every time you run the program, or is it only sometimes under certain conditions? So you need to really be able to pinpoint what that problem is. All right, then we are going to hunt for bugs. So you'll look for any warnings or errors. So you'll have yellow triangles or red rectangles that will tell you that there are issues on specific lines of your code. You can look at what you changed most recently, because if your app was working up until a certain point and then you made some sort of change and something broke, right? What was that change and why did it break something? All right, explain your code to someone else. That's always very useful. So as you're explaining it, sometimes you might have a light bulb moment where you're like, oh, that's why it's not working. Or the person you're explaining it to might be like, that doesn't make quite any sense. So let's see if that's what is actually the problem, right? So explaining it to somebody else just gives you an extra mind to put towards the problem. All right, and then you're going to look for code relating to the problem. So if I know that like one of my set properties isn't setting the property, right, I want to find that line of code and see what the issue there might be. All right, then we are going to try solutions. You want to make small changes at a time. You don't want to just go ahead and like overhaul your entire program because something isn't working. You make small changes and test it, because if you make an entirely new program to fix a problem, you might just be making more of a problem. All right, so try those small changes first. And then finally, you want to document as you go. All right, so record what you learned, what strategies you used to solve the problem, and any questions that you might have. So hopefully this documentation will help you not to make the same mistakes in the future and just learn a little bit more in depth how all of this code stuff works. All right, so keep this debugging process in mind as we move through today's bubbles. Now that we know about the debugging process, we are going to jump into bubble number 1 here on Unit 3, Lesson 6. And our instructions are very simple here. It says, debug this program. Super easy, right? All right, so before we really jump into debugging, I want to point out a few things that help us debug our programs that are built in here on code.org. So the first thing is the slider on the bottom of the screen. I've mentioned this in another video, but we have the turtle and the rabbit on this slider down here in the debug console. So turtle obviously is going to go slow and rabbit is obviously going to go fast. So if you have it slid all the way over to the rabbit side, your code is going to run at the normal speed that a code would run. If you've got it all the way over to the turtle side, your code is going to run much, much slower, so you can see exactly what's happening line by line as the code runs. We also have the console.logs. So those, as we know, appear down here in the debug console. So if you build console.log commands throughout your program and you see those commands showing up in the debug console, that's basically a marker telling you that your code is running correctly at that point in time, or hopefully correctly at that point in time. You still might have some issues, but it gives you the idea that your code has actually ran in the section where that console.log is. The other thing that I want to mention here is the yellow triangle here on line 2. So before we even start debugging this program, I can tell we're going to have some sort of issue on line 2 because we have this yellow triangle. You also might see a red square telling you that there's an issue, which we will see here in a moment. All right, so let's go ahead and run this program first to see what's going on with it. All right, so I'm in turtle mode, so these are going to highlight each line of code as they run to make us see exactly where we are in the code. So it's highlighted the first line, this first console log that says, here is my favorite color. We can see that line ran correctly because it showed down in our debug console. Then our yellow triangle has turned to a red square once we hit line 2 because we have an error here. It says, oops, we can't figure out what green is. Perhaps you meant the string green with quotes. If this is meant to be a variable, make sure you declare a variable by using the command var green. All right, so we haven't learned how to create variables yet, so I'm highly doubting that this is supposed to be a variable, right? What we want to display in the console log is that our favorite color is green, and then our favorite number is 5. But we're getting hung up here on line 2 because it doesn't know what green is. What's missing? If you look at line 1 and line 3, also strings, they have quotation marks around them. So we are missing our quotation marks around the word green. It's trying to read the word green as a variable, but again, we have not created any variables yet. We don't know what those are, so that's not exactly what we were going for. We need quotation marks around it so it will display correctly in that console.log. So we've added quotation marks to our line 2, and I'm going to go ahead and reset the app and run it again. I'm sorry for that loud noise in the background. It's the heating and air unit here in my room. It's very, very loud, so you'll hear that on and off. But anyway, let's go ahead and run and see what happens. All right, line 1, here's my favorite color. Line 2 now has ran correctly. It says green. Line 3, here's my favorite number. And then we get 5 as the favorite number. All right, so we know that that has ran correctly. All of our console logs have appeared as they should. The only line we don't need quotation marks around is line 4 because 5 is a number and we do not need the quotation marks around numbers. All right, so we are fixed, ready to go and move on to the next one. So make sure you are clicking finish at the bottom to continue on to the next bubble so it turns your bubble green and you did it, right? Makes it a lot easier for me to grade. All right, bubble number 2. This one, we actually have some information over here in our user interface. And we have this text that says my message. So we have the ID, the element ID here is main text, and then we have the screen 1. So those are only 2 elements that we have here. So let's go ahead and run this program and see what it does. Of course, our instructions, again, are very, very in-depth and just say debug this program. So we'll run it and see what happens. All right, we're on turtle pace again. So our first line is a set property to change the background color of the screen to light blue, which it has done. Our second line was to change the text of the main text box here to welcome to my app, which we can tell it did because it says welcome to my app now up here instead of my message. Line 3 was to change the font size of the main text to 20, which it did. And then we encountered an error here on line 4, which was to change the text color of our main text to blue. And so obviously that did not happen. So we can read what it says in our debug console about this error. You can also just hover over the red square and it will tell you what the issue is as well. So in line 4, it says, oops, we can't figure out what blue is. Perhaps you meant the string blue with quotes. If this is meant to be a variable, make sure you declare it a variable, var blue. All right, so again, it's the same exact issue as last time, just with set properties instead of console.logs. So we need to, sorry about the bell. All right, so we need to add quotation marks around the word blue here in line 4. So you'll notice when we changed the background color of the screen to light blue, we have quotation marks around light blue. We have quotation marks around the text that we changed in line 2. We even have quotation marks around the font size of 20 that we changed the main text to in line 3. So all of these things have quotation marks around them for the element that we're changing. So we need to do the same here with blue. So we're just going to go ahead and add our quotation marks. All right, so now blue is in quotation marks. It should not be trying to think that's a variable. It should hopefully be changing it to the actual color blue. So we're going to reset and run the program again, still on turtle speed so we can see what's happening. All right, our background changes to light blue. Our text changes to welcome to my app. The text gets smaller. It changes to blue. And then the font changes to Arial. All right, so it ran all 5 lines of our code with no issues. So we should be good to go. That was the only issue that we could find. So once you are done fixing that issue on line 4, you can go ahead and finish and move on to bubble number 3. All right, so we have the instructions on this one to run the program to see how it works. So we're going to go ahead and run the program. And I'm going to mouse over my smiley face because we can see on line 1, our on event is to mouse over this smiley. Okay. So, whoop, whoop, whoop. Uh-oh. All right. So after a few mouse overs, our smiley face has completely exited the room here, right? We don't see the smiley face on the screen anymore. And that's kind of a problem because the whole point of this program is for me to be able to mouse over the smiley and have it change color and change position on the screen. So now that it's gone, I can't do that anymore without resetting the app and running it again, which we don't want to have to do every time. All right, so we need to go ahead and debug the program so the smiley face does not go off the screen. This one's a little bit different of a debug because we don't have any yellow triangles or red squares showing us any particular lines of code that are a problem. So the code itself works, right? There's nothing wrong with how it's written. It's just that it's not written correctly to make this program function how it should. So we need to fix that. All right, so we do have our on event to mouse over the smiley. When we mouse over it, we have a set property to change the color of the smiley face. All right, and I find this section of the code interesting. So it's giving us RGB, and then in parentheses, we have 3 random numbers between 0 and 255. So what this section is actually doing is assigning a random number to our R value, a random number to our G value, and a random number to our B value to come up with a random color combination. So that's just kind of an interesting way to get random colors in your app. Useful to know. All right, then our next lines 3 and 4, are doing kind of the same thing. They are our location of our smiley face on the X and Y axis on the screen. So that is telling me that these are probably the 2 lines of code that I'm going to need to change because the smiley face is exiting the screen and not staying on the screen. So the X and Y positions at this point, random numbers 0 to 400 for X and 0 to 500 for Y. I think it's probably going to be a little bit too big of a range, so we need to edit that random number range. All right, so let's go ahead over on our user interface when the app is not running. Excuse me. If you remember, when you hover your mouse or your cursor over the screen, it gives you the X and Y coordinates of where your mouse is hanging out on that screen. All right, so I want my smiley face to be contained to the screen. So I don't want to go all the way down to the edge of the screen. I think X goes up to 320 max and Y goes up to 450 max. I don't want to go quite that high because if you remember, the left top corner of the smiley face is where this X and Y coordinate is going to be positioned. So if I made it all the way to the bottom part of the screen right here, then it would still be off the screen and I wouldn't really be able to see it. So I'm going to come in a little bit from the side so we can see the smiley face still, even if it goes down to that bottom corner. So I think for my purposes, I think right there looks pretty good. So X would go up to 270 and Y would go up to 400. So instead of 400 and 500, we want to reduce that a little bit. So I'm going to go here on line 3. And line 3, I want it to be a random number between 0 and I said 270. And then on line 4, I want my Y to go up to a maximum of 400 instead of 500. So hopefully that will keep my smiley face on the screen without going off screen so I can't see it and can't mouse over it anymore. So let's go ahead and test it with our new numbers in here to see if the smiley face will go off the screen or not. Right, I'm doing lots and lots. Of mouse overs. All right, just testing it to make sure that it's actually staying on the screen through a lot of testing. All right, and it never went off the screen, so that's good. It did get close to the edges, but we could always still see it and make sure that it was staying in the right location. So I think that we're good. If you want to edit your numbers for the X and Y coordinates a little bit so it doesn't go quite as close to the edge, you're more than welcome to set it to whatever you think is best. But I'm satisfied. It doesn't go off the screen. I can always mouse over it regardless of where it goes. So I think that we have satisfied debugging on this bubble here. So let's go ahead and go to bubble number 4. All right. So this bubble number 4 is the music player app, and it gives us some very specific instructions of what we need to do. So the first thing it tells us is don't put on-event blocks inside other on-event blocks. You almost never want to. There are probably certain occasions where you would put an on-event inside another on-event, but for us as beginning coders, we probably don't need to ever have an on-event inside of another on-event or nested in another on-event. So obviously, it's going to be important to what we're doing here in a minute. But before we talk more about that, let's look at these instructions. So first, it says to run this program, hit the up button, play the music, then stop the music, and then hide the controls. Without resetting, we are going to repeat the process to play the music again. All right, so let's go ahead and do this first step. All right, we're going to run the app. Okay, I'm going to hit the up button. And you're not going to be able to hear me in a second. So I'm going to play the music, let it play for a second, then stop it, and then hide the controls. So let's see what happens. Shoo, it's potato quality playing it while I'm recording a video. Lovely. All right. So I played the music, I stopped the music, and then I hid the controls, all right, as it told me to. Okay, and it says don't reset the program without resetting the program, so I am not going to click on this reset button. All right, I'm going to repeat the process to play the music again. So we're going to hit the up button, play the music, stop the music, and hide the controls. Again, sorry for the bell. All right, let's go ahead. I hit the up button, I'm going to hit play, and then I'm going to hit stop and hide the controls. All right, we stopped and hid the controls. All right, and I know it's potato quality, but if you could hear at the beginning of the song, it started playing the song, and then it started playing the song again over top of the original play of the song. So it was playing the same song twice, and they were not aligned at all, so it sounded pretty terrible. All right, if I were to go through this process again, press the play button a third time and do the same thing a fourth time, a fifth time, a sixth time, all right, we're going to have that many versions of the song playing over top of themselves. So it's just going to sound like an almighty mess. All right. So we want to fix that. We want to make sure that the music is not playing over top of itself. We want to debug this program so that does not happen anymore. All right. So step 2, it says, do you notice something weird happening the second time we played the music? Yeah, obviously we noticed. All right, step 3, it says discuss with a partner why you think this is happening. hint, 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 what did it say up here at the very top of this instruction panel? Don't put on event blocks inside other on event blocks. I don't know, that might have something to do with it, right? All right, so we want to debug the program to find this issue, or sorry, to fix this issue. Okay. Phew, sorry. So for the up button click, all right, it's going to show all of the controls. So it's going to show the down button, the play button, and the stop button, all right? Then we have a comment here that says to hide the controls. This is the on event for the down button. When we click the down button, it's going to hide the down button, the play button, and the stop button. All right. Our next comment says it's to play the music. So when we click the play button, the sound will start playing. And then our last on event is to stop the music. So when we click on that stop button, the music will stop playing. We can tell that the stop music, the play music, and this hide the controls on events, all three of those on events are nested or stuck within this top on event for the up button. So these on events are really useful when we're looking at them in block mode because they have this lovely green highlight all around the on event. So for this top one, for the up button, we can see that this green bar goes all the way down to the bottom of the program. So all three of these other on events are nested or are sitting inside of another on event. So we need to get these three other on events outside this first on event. So they are standing by themselves, loud and proud. They don't want to be associated with this other on event. All right. So I find that the easiest way to do this is by switching to text mode. Without switching to text mode, I have to drag and drop more blocks of code that I'm comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to text mode. So up here in the top corner of my workspace, I had said show text. All right, so it switches to the text version of my coding. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. All right, our up button was our first on event. All right, once we get down here to line 8 where it says hide controls, this is where our nested on events start. So I want line 8 all the way through line 26 to not be here where they are. So what I'm going to do is highlight from line 8 to line 26. Line 27 is the ending coding for the first on event. So you'll notice these three, line 14, line 20, and line 26 all look the same as the line 27. That's because that curly bracket, the parenthesis, and the semicolon are how you close off an on event, right? So that's the closing of that first on event. All right, so we just want lines 8 through lines 26. All right, I've got them highlighted, and I'm going to do Control-C on my keyboard to copy them. All right, and then I'm just going to backspace here because I don't need any of these in here. All right, so I backspaced a few times. So now I just have the on event for my up button. All right, and everything within that. So I'm going to go down and then below where that on event ends, right, when I switch back to block mode, you can see I just have the one on event. All right, so when I switch back to text mode now, I'm going to go ahead and paste Control-V as in Victor, Control-V to paste. All right, all of my other on events that I copied. All right, so what you are going to see me doing now for a second, I'm just fixing all of my spacing because I'm a little bit neurotic about how my code is spaced, and I want all of this to be spaced on the same lines as the first on event. So I'm just making the spacing look right. You do not have to do this part if you do not want to, but I think it looks better. All right, so I'm just fixing this spacing really quick. Just me being a little bit crazy. All right, so now I have pasted. So I have my hide the controls on event by itself, my play the music on event by itself, and then my stop the music on event by itself. All right, so I'm going to switch back to block mode so y'all can see what this looks like. All right, so we have the on event for the up button. Now it only contains what we need for the up button to work. All right, then we have the on event to hide the controls standing here by itself. Let me get out this weird spacing block. I'm kind of crazy about it. I hate those things. All right. So we have the hide controls on event by itself. We have the play the music on event by itself. And then we have the stop the music on event by itself. All right. So we have hopefully fixed the issue of not putting on event blocks inside other on event blocks. All right. We made it so they're all standing by themselves. Fully capable adults now. All right. So let's go ahead and test it to make sure that this works. So I'm going to go ahead and reset and run the app again. All right, so now when I click on the up button, my controls display as they should. Now I'm going to click on the play button. All right, I'm going to stop. It's still potato quality, but it's playing the song. All right, then we're going to hide the controls. Then we are going to, without hitting the reset button, we're going to show the controls again with our up button. All right, now I'm going to click on play and see what happens. All right, it seems to have worked. Now, when I played it a second time without resetting the program, it does not have the same song playing over top of itself. It's just playing one version of the song, as it should. Right, so that is exactly what we wanted to have happen. It looks like our fix for this bubble has worked. So once you have all of those on event blocks standing on their own and not nested inside another on event, you can go ahead and click on finish and move on to bubble number 5. This is the last one we're going to cover together for this video. All right, so bubble 5 is a prediction bubble. So you are going to look at the code. You can't change anything about the code, and you cannot run the code yet. But we're going to look at the code to determine what the issue might be here, right? We're debugging, so we're looking for issues. So our classmates needs our help. They wrote this program meant to make it so that when you click each button, that button gets bigger and the font changes. But there's a bug and the program doesn't work as it's intended. So we are going to read through the following program, see if we can find where the bug might be, discuss the following questions with your partner, and write down your predictions, and then run the program to see if you were correct. All right, so our questions are, what will happen when you run this program and click on one of the buttons? And the second question is, what advice would you give to the person who wrote this program so that they can avoid this type of bug in the future? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read through this code to see if I can predict what's going to happen here. All right, so I have an on event to click on the blue button. All right, when I click on the blue button, the red button is going to change its font. The red button is going to change its width, and the red button is going to change its height. All right, so that was lines 2, 3, and 4. All right, line 7, we have our second on event for clicking on that red button. All right, line 8 says the blue button is going to change the font. The blue button will change the width, and the blue button will change the height. So lines 8 through 10 is changing our blue button properties, but that's when we click on the red button. So obviously something's a little bit wonky here. They've flipped what each button is doing. All right, so when I click one of the buttons, let's go ahead and put in our answer. When I click, let's say, the blue button, the red button's properties will change, and vice versa, right? Because when I click on the blue button, all of the red properties change. But when I click on the red button, all of the blue button properties change, right? So they've just reversed how that's supposed to be set up. All right, so we know that that's what's going to happen. And the advice that I would give to the person who wrote this program, let's say I would tell the person who wrote this program to keep an eye on their element IDs, right? They probably just got confused because they have a blue button and a red button. Maybe they just weren't reading it that closely. So they need to keep an eye on their element IDs, all right? They need to test often to make sure the changes they want are what is happening in their code and maybe show their code to a friend who can help them catch issues like this in the future. All right, so that would be my advice. You can give them whatever advice you think is appropriate. All right, but let's go ahead. Now that we've put in our answer, we can run this program and see if our predictions were correct. So when I run, all right, we are going to click on the blue button. And when I click on that blue button, my red button font changed, my width changed, and then my height changed on the red button. All right, and then when I click on the red button, the font, the width, and then the height of the blue button has changed. Right, so these are just reversed. All they need to do is either change this on event to be the red button click or switch their set properties around. Would probably be easiest to change the on event, but we figured out the issue, so we can move on to our next bubble. All right, so we have made it to bubble number 6, but this is where this video is going to stop. If you are in my class, you know that once we get to the bubbles that have an A, B, and C option, this is where I leave you and let you try and figure it out on your own. If you have any issues as you're trying to complete it, you can, of course, ask a friend, do some Googling, try that 3 before me method before you call in the teacher, myself, for assistance. If you absolutely cannot figure it out and you need help, absolutely ask me and I'll help you. All right. If you are just watching these videos because you are not one of my students and you just need help with your coding, keep an eye out for the next video in this Unit 3 series, and we will go over the solutions for bubbles A, B, and C here in Bubble 6. So we'll see you guys next time.